medical ethics conference that the association has put together. We'd ask if, first of all, people could turn off their cell phones. We have, Baruch Hashem, a great crowd here tonight. If anyone did not receive parking validation yet, you can see me after the event. Also, we have continuing education credits, thanks to Dr. Stuart Finder. If anyone did not get those yet as well, you can see me after the event, and we'll take care of that for you. I'd like to thank Dr. Bernie Agatstein and Dr. Irving Leibovitz for their assistance in planning and putting together this special event tonight. And I want to just take one moment for people to know. A lot of people were asking me, what is the Association for the Advancement of Medical Halacha? And it's an important organization that's really getting moving of late. You should check out the website. The website is medicalhalacha.org. And on that website, you can find videos. The first conference that the Rav held in New York, you can watch the whole video on that website. There's shuvos that the Rav has written on medical and yonei refuah that are related to all kinds of issues that are relevant in hospitals and for doctors. There's discussion boards. There is a section where you can ask the rabbi. And through this website and these seminars, this association under the leadership of Rav Asher Weiss is really furthering the discussion of halacha and medicine. If anyone would like to meet with the Rav, he is still here for one more day. You can see me anytime or send me an email, be in touch, and we can arrange for a time for you to have a chance to speak to Rav Weiss while he is still here in Los Angeles. Tonight, there is an issue that we've asked the Rav to address. He's going to address a number of issues, but what inspired the discussion is legislation in California that requires a physician, upon request. Normally, in the past, they had been required to provide comprehensive information and counseling about the range of options that are available for end-of-life options. But there's a new law today, which now requires that physicians must proactively inform all terminally ill patients of their right to know about any information and their range of options. Now, this might seem not to be problematic, but with the possibility of physician-assisted suicide becoming legal in California very soon, a physician could be required to inform a patient about this option that would be problematic in halacha. And even if the physician is not comfortable telling the patient, and they refer them to another physician, that physician will tell the patient. So a doctor, especially a doctor who is concerned about practicing in accordance with Jewish law, has a lot of challenges practicing in the modern world, and we've turned to the Rav to ask us for guidance for how a person who cares about halacha can navigate some of these issues. At the end, we will have some time for question and answer. I think we'll ask people, there is a microphone in the back there near the camera. People just make sure not to block the camera, but near where Dr. Leibovitz is sitting. People can line up in the back and we can have some questions. You can ask them into the microphone. And I just want to say one word about Rabbi Weiss and then call up a dear friend to give a proper introduction. And this I say, me'omek libi, from the depths of my heart, what I want to say about why it was important to us to have Rav Asher Weiss with us tonight. First of all, he has been known worldwide for many years for his incredible breadth of knowledge. Rabbi Weiss has an encyclopedic knowledge on his fingertips, and an incredible analytic ability, an insight. His books and his institutes in Israel have demonstrated his wisdom and his knowledge. But in addition to that, he is really one of the world's leading poskim today, the leading decisors of Jewish law, who we turn to for the most difficult questions. Baruch Hashem, we have in Los Angeles, and some of them are here tonight, some of the greatest Talmidei Chachamim and poskim around. But even still, there are times when we have questions that are so challenging and so difficult that we have to turn to the world's experts. We have in this hospital, Dr. Shlomo Melman can tell you about the technology that's happening today. Questions that we are facing today are questions that have never been asked before. And they're sometimes so difficult and such life and death questions that we feel that we have to turn to someone with the shoulders and the expertise of Rav Asher Weiss Shlita. And so we do. And if I can just say one personal word, it's not just his wisdom, his expertise, his knowledge of Kol HaTorah Kula, his creativity, his penetrating analysis and ability to provide incredibly clear insight to challenging questions, and the way that Rabbi Weiss is turned to by people from the whole of the Jewish community. As you see tonight, we just put out the word that Rabbi Weiss will be here, and people just flock from all backgrounds and all types of communities. But in addition to that, there's something especially special about Rabbi Weiss, which is the sensitivity that he possesses. I've had the opportunity, the unfortunate opportunity, to have to call Rabbi Weiss sometimes in the middle of the night. And I literally call him shaking because I feel so bad to call him in the middle of the night. But we have sometimes questions that are so urgent and life and death questions that we feel we just have to turn to Rabbi Weiss. And I feel horrible. The second he answers the phone, I begin apologizing profusely. And he immediately makes me feel comfortable and assures me it's okay. You can call anytime. What can we help you with? He shows that he cares about every single Jew. And sometimes, you know, the answer that we receive might not be the answer that is the easiest answer for the people who are asking. And again, Rabbi Weiss recognizes that the questions that we're asking, how difficult they are, and how the answers sometimes are not the easiest answer to take. So instead of just saying, you know, no, or just, you know, poo-pooing the question, he will guide me in how to break the news, how to explain to the family his answer, and the reasoning for the answer, so they can understand what's behind it. So we have before us tonight someone who is turned to by the greatest rabbis of our times, someone who has an incredible depth of knowledge, of wisdom, and ability to answer the most difficult questions, and someone who does that with a tremendous sensitivity and compassion and something that just inspires all of us. So this is why we turn to Rav Asher Weisslichter for the most difficult questions that we face in this hospital. And I know that's true around the world because when I call him, his assistant always tells me, make sure to remind him of the question because he's dealing with literally dozens of life and death questions at any given moment. So I'm sorry to say this all in front of him. If he wasn't here, I would have said much, much more. But this is who we have for us tonight. And to really give him the proper introduction, though, I want to call upon our friend and our leader of our community, Tzvika Reisman, to provide some divrei hakdama for Rav Asher Weisslichter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jason. Kvod, Rabbi Weiss, Rabbonim, doctors, friends, and Mishpocha. I don't know what can I add to what you say, Jason. You're right. He's a special man, special person. And in this week's Parsha, Parshas Tetzaveh, Moshe Rabbeinu is not mentioned. The man is not mentioned. The Parsha emphasizes, talks primarily about Aaron HaKohen. Bigdei Kehuna, the Choshim, Urim v'Tumim, the Tzitz, all about Aaron HaKohen, nothing about Moshe. Says it's for Semes, or not. The menorah that we start the Parsha with has two components, the ner and the or, the light. The ner is the candle. The ner represents the mitzvah. The mitzvah is represented by the guf. Who is making the mitzvah, who is producing the mitzvah, who is performing the mitzvah? The person, the guf. The or, the unseeable, what you don't see. The neshama, represented by Moshe. This parsha has the guf and the neshama. The guf by Aaron HaKohen, and the neshama Moshe Rabbeinu. The Sfasayim has both. One is Moshe Rabbeinu, says the Sfasemes, and one is Aaron HaKohen. We needed in the Midbar two people to present, to represent the guf and the neshama. We have in our generation one person, Reb Asher Weiss, and neshama and a guf in one. Sfasayim, what a peh, what a dibur, what a guf. The sensitivity that Jason just mentioned a minute ago, it's not just with regards to doctors, just to patients, to every student, every yeshiva bocher, every Jew is represented by Osher Weiss. Osher Weiss, בבקשה.
What could I say after such kind and somewhat exaggerated introductions? I thank you profoundly for the opportunity to be here tonight. And after these introductions, it would be a bit difficult to live up to your expectations. We are living in a day and age, in a time which is a tremendous responsibility, a tremendous challenge. And I many times say to my Talmidim, to my disciples, our generation needs Gedolim of the caliber of the Ramban and the Rashba, of the great Rishonim that lived hundreds of years ago. Because we are challenged with questions in almost every field. To put it in Lashon Kodesh in Hebrew, Shelo Sharum Avoteinu. We are living in a changing world, in a constantly and rapidly changing landscape. In scientific developments, in technology, in medicine, even in financial tools, instruments, and institutions. And in almost every area in halacha, we are challenged and confronted with new shilas. And it is a dynamic world and a rapidly changing landscape in every area in halacha. We do not have the Ramban and the Rashi. We need them, but they're not around. So I and people like me are humbled, but somebody must rise to the challenge, because we need to supply guidance and answers to the many questions and many dilemmas. So tonight, we are here in this wonderful and magnificent institution, Cedars-Sinai Hospital, Los Angeles. I think this hospital is a tremendous Kiddush Hashem. I am the Poisek of Shari Tzedek Hospital, and you know there's a great deal of cooperation. As my dear friend, Dr. Yonatan Alevi told me, I do not know whether Dr. Melnit is present here tonight, is he? So warmest regards from your dear friend. And I think this hospital is doing not only a tremendous service to the Jewish community in Los Angeles, to the general community in Los Angeles, because it is our Torah and our sages that teaches us every human being is created in the image of a Kodesh Baruch Hu. And it is a schus to serve the greater community, the Jewish community, but besides serving and administering medicine, I think it's a tremendous Kiddush Hashem, proving that a modern medical institution could be run in accordance to halacha. I think that in itself is a tremendous Kiddush Hashem. So this is a tremendous challenge, a challenge that grows and develops and evolves from day to day. And the most basic question I would like to deal with in my opening remarks is, I am many times asked by young people who would like to dedicate their lives to serve as doctors, bringing help and salvation to people who most desperately need it. Nothing is a more lofty ideal and aspiration than helping people, the ill, the desperate. Should we get into this? A profession which has so many halachic dilemmas and issues, maybe Maybe as Yirei Shamayim, we should just look for a different job, stay away. Why get into a profession that comes with so many halachic problems, dilemmas, challenges? But this is a question which arises in many different endeavors in our modern world. Well, becoming a doctor, you definitely will have many problems down the road, but the same applies to nurses. The same applies to lawyers. Well, embarking on a legal profession would bring you to deal with issues of erkaot, turning to secular courts, encouraging people or discouraging people. And the rulings you might get, would they comply with Choshen Mishpat? How about investing? In many fields of finances, we have serious halachic problems. So could you own residential buildings when you need people to take care of them on Shabbos? How do you manage real estate on Shabbos? And in many financial institutions and instruments, we have questions of ribbis. And maybe one of the most relevant examples, maybe some of you would be surprised to know that the Mossad has a Rav, has a rabbi. And most of the questions he has to deal with come to me, ultimately. And he consults me on a steady basis. So how do we relate to young people that want to volunteer to intelligence agencies in Israel, serving the security of the state? Is anything a more worthy endeavor? But there are grave halachic issues involved. And I think the basic question would be, what type of a world do we want to live in? Do we want to live in a world in which no frum Jews, no observant Jews will be doctors, nurses, lawyers in the security community in Israel? Will we leave the world to those that are not observant, that don't care about halacha? And when we really need a doctor that cares and could treat our ill with compassion and with sensitivity and with caring, we will not find one. And when we need lawyers and legal professionals to care for our needs of our community, we will not find one, because they all shied away and they all went elsewhere. No, I think that would be a terrible mistake. So I think we need to rise to the challenge and deal with issues as they come up and do our best to find halachic solutions to the many dilemmas which we confront in all these modern professions in our modern world. So I definitely do encourage young, conscientious people to serve as doctors, to serve as nurses, to serve in the security apparatus in Israel in the many different fields and areas. And I think our challenge is to engage in the world and not to shy away. We find many sugyas and many sources in Shas and the Talmud in which Chazal went to extremes in the leniency because of what they defined as tzorchei rabim, the needs of the greater community. Just to give one example, in Hilchas Eruvin, we find a concept of Yud Zayin on the base, Pasei Berois. It is a lenient concept, especially set into place for the Oile Regolim. The multitudes that came to Yerushalayim on their way to Yerushalayim, B'yamei HaRegel, when the Beis HaMikdash stood, Shalosh Pa'omim B'shoni Yeruah Kol Zechucha, and Jews came from near and from far, multitudes to Yerushalayim, to supply drinking water for those people. Chazal had a special tikkun in Eruvin, which isn't valid in any other circumstance, only for the Oila Regola, because that was the need of the greater community. On the other hand, we find outstanding leniency in Chazal and many different sources for the need of parnas, the well-being, the financial well-being of the rabbin, of the klal. Notably, the Mishnah increases of Chesed Aleph. Kisha'amdu kinim al dinar zahav, when birds that should be brought as a sacrifice for a woman that had a baby, the prices went up because of the demand, and obviously supply and demand always controlled the economy as it does today. And Reb Shimon and Gamliel ruled that a woman that had 5 babies could bring 1 sacrifice, and that brought the prices tumbling down. And the Rishonim deal with the question. So what was the basis of that ruling? A lenient ruling, just caring for the financial state of the broader community. So do we want to encourage our young people to engage and to have parnasa, to be able to support the greater community? The Divrei Chaim, the great sons of 200 years ago, formulated what was considered as groundbreaking halachic ruling 200 years ago, a document, a shtar mechira, similar to what we know as mechiras chametz, to solve the problem of Shabbos. Because in that specific time, one of the mainstays of Jewish parnasa in Poland, in Russia, was Jews were innkeepers. How could you run an inn on Shabbos? Avoiding the problems of Amira V'Nochli Shavuos. So the Divrei Chaim, the sons of formulated the Shtar Mechira, which was innovative and, of course, a big controversy. Reb Shlomo Kluger was very negative about it, but there are many similar examples. So on one hand, I think we should encourage young people to engage. They should be able to provide for the greater community. So some might argue, well, 200 years ago in Russia, in the Jewish communities in Ukraine and Poland, poverty was so extreme that if we wouldn't come up with leniency and with kulas, they couldn't survive. We are living in a different day and age. Well, yes, we are living in a different day and age, but the needs are also far greater. And we still need to rely on those amongst us that are making a decent living. They should supply. And they should be forthcoming to the greater community. So I do think, for both of these reasons, we need to deal with questions as they come up and encourage young people to engage in medical professions, in legal professions, and deal with halachic problems as they arise. So let me make one point very clear. If we need to violate halacha, there is no justification. Parnasa would be irrelevant. Ein chachma, ve'ein tvuna, ve'ein eitzah, neged Hashem. However, we need to make a major effort from the halachic perspective to come up with solutions to the many dilemmas that confront the medical profession or any other endeavor. So Rabbi William, my dear friend, and I think he's doing a great service to the community, and besides applying his insight, understanding, and Rabbi Wiener is a very young Rav, but I've been with him for many years. He consulted me before he took his job, and I think I was very encouraging. And I think it was one of the best aids I ever gave a person. I think Rabbi Wiener is also, with his personality, doing a great service, and he's also Mekadesh Shem Shemayim. And Rabbi Jason mentioned legislation in California requiring a physician to be forthcoming and explaining to the patient all the options that he has. I do not see that as a halachic problem. I would very much prefer that the options be presented to a patient by a God-fearing, observant doctor than by others. Giving the patient the knowledge of his options will be done with him or without him. That is what the law requires. Somebody will do it, and therefore I see no halachic problem. It would not be defined as lifnei evolution, neither would it be defined as Messiah l'dei oivra haveir. This is the knowledge he deserves to get by law. This is the knowledge he will get. So I don't see any halachic problem in an observant Jew supplying that knowledge. And as I said, I prefer the knowledge be presented by a God-fearing, observant physician than by others. Not meaning to say that we need to do anything which would be against the law. You do not necessarily need to try to persuade him or discourage him what to do and what not to do if that is not legal. But still, there are always nuances and sensitivities. So I would prefer an observant, God-fearing physician supplying this information than others. So not only do I not see this as a halachic problem, I would even recommend. How do we define the concept of Messiah l'dei oivra haveira? Because this is a question that comes up quite often, and I was asked many times. A doctor that is an anesthesiologist. So could he be part of a team when performing surgery that is not halachically permissible? Whether it would be the termination of a pregnancy in circumstances that are not halachically permissible, whether it would be other forms of surgery and reproductive organs which might not be halachically permissible. He's an anesthesiologist. And my response, my halachic response is you could be part of the team. And that would not be halachically forbidden. And I am fully aware that what I say now goes against the Psak of Reb Shlomo Zalman. And Reb Shlomo Zalman was, in my opinion, the greatest halachic authority of our recent times. And I'm in Cheshleima, Chere Gimel, Sinakuf Gimel, Reb Shlomo Zalman rules that would be Messiah l'dei oivra haveira. In my humble opinion, it would not be defined as Messiah l'dei oivra haveira. So in the concept of Messiah l'dei oivra haveira, maybe some of you aren't familiar with the Talmudic term. There is a negative precept. Did I get it right? Lo ta'aseh. That'd be a negative precept. Elav. Lifnei iver lo titen mishol. You cannot put a stumbling block before a blind man. Chazal interpret this law as you cannot supply an aveda to a transgressor. Chazal differentiate between two situations: klei avra denahara, and a situation which is chad eivar hanoah. So if he would not be able to transgress without your aiding him and supplying him, that would be a biblical transgression. If he can do the same without your assistance, you are still forbidden to assist him and help him transgress. That is what we define as Messiah L'Dei Oivrei Aveda. But in my opinion, Messiah is only in a situation in which I am directly supplying the material which he needs to perform that Aveda. Being an anesthesiologist is not participating in illegal activity. It is merely caring for the patient while he is undergoing surgery. Regardless of what that surgery might be, and therefore my pshat was, you could be an anesthesiologist even if the surgical procedure might not be permissible in accordance to Allah. The job of the anesthesiologist caring for the patient and making the surgery bearable and safe. And therefore he would not be defined as a Messiah, L'Dei Oivrei Aveda. Could a doctor be part of a panel or a board that needs to sign off on terminating pregnancies, knowing that sometimes the decision will be not accordance to halakha? Yes, I think he could. And I think he should, trying to give his perspective and his input in as much as he can to try to sway things in accordance to halakha, knowing that maybe most of the time you will not be successful, but somebody is going to do the job. And I once again prefer he be part of it rather than others. That once again would not be considered Messiah L'Dei Oivrei Aveda, even though maybe he would need to sign off. That is a formality. It would be similar. It would be similar. While in Israel, the Frum community is deeply involved in the political process. And in every municipality, we have members. Well, many of the funds allocated to different activities are activities that involve Chilul Shabbos and other extremely questionable activities from the halakhic perspective. So could you be a Chaver Iriyah and a member of different municipal committees allocating funds, and some of the funds will be allocated to questionable activities from the halakhic perspective? Well, I don't think that many people ask the question, am I allowed to run for public office? I think politics has a dynamic of its own. Not many politicians came to ask me, Shilas, could they run to the Knesset or to the Iriyah? But it is the same. Well, you're going to be a member of Vadat Ksafim. You're going to be signing off on many funds allocated to many different activities. I do not think that would be a halakhic problem, because the funds will be allocated to those that at least legally deserve them. They're going to be allocated whether you're a part of the process or not. That would not be considered Messiah L'Dei Oivrei Aveda. The same would refer to being part of a team or a committee that has to sign off in a hospital sometimes on procedures that might not be halachically permissible. Another relevant question dealing with a broader framework of dilemmas in modern medicine when a medical professional is faced with violating halakhic norms. In psychological therapy, it is also an area which is dynamic and changing with new ideas from time to time, and sometimes this therapy involves procedures that might be problematic from the aspect of kibud av ve'ed. People that feel they were abused at a younger age, sometimes they might involve lashon hara or other halachic shaylos. Which brings us to a very broad discussion, which I don't feel I can really expand on and elaborate before this forum, which is very, very diverse. But I wrote a very interesting essay, very interesting article, defining the basic and fundamental differentiation between mitzvot shebein adam lamakom and mitzvot shebein adam lachavero. Why in the realm of bein adam lamakom we find very concrete and very definitive criteria. Ben Adam v'Chavero, we find a totally different approach. And my basic argument was, the entire spectrum of mitzvah sheben Adam v'Chavero is based on two fundamental principles. One is Tzedek, Hayosher, V'Hamusar, and the other is Tikkun Ha'olam, Tkolas HaTzibur. And when any of these mitzvahs is based on serving justice, righteousness, and also the benefit of the community, it is basically a heter. Anybody that learned extensively the Chafetz Chaim and Shmiras HaLashon knows that one of the basic concepts in Hilchos Lashon Hara is when it's l'to'eles, there is no issa of Lashon Hara. Is there a consideration how big, substantial the to'eles has to be? No. Because it is not that the benefit overrides the Isser of Lashon Hara. The benefit renders the Isser invalid. Because when there are no bad intentions, and the person feels he needs to say what he says, not to cause pain or suffering or damage to another party, but to the benefit of the community, that would not be defined as an Isser of Lashon Hara. It is not similar to in the realm of Bein Adam Lamakom when one principle overrides the other, like mitzvahs aseh doicha mitzvahs loisas. In Simarei Shayavov and Hilchos Shabbos we learned that by tzorach harabim Chazal were lenient regarding Amira Lenochri. Tzorach Gadol, we are matter a shvus, as we learn in Shulchan Aruch and Hilchos Shabbos and Shin Vav. Now, in Bein Adam L'Chaveiroi, when it's l'to'eles, there is no prohibition of Lashon Hara. And I prove this basic principle from Dinei Gneva V'Gzeila, Choy V'Lamazik, Mal Ben Pnei Chaveroi Berabim, from many different areas in Halacha. So I feel, generally speaking, when it is part of therapy and treating patients, then many of the different aspects of Bein Adam L'Chaveroi would be deemed halachically permissible, not only in a geder of the chuyo, but rather hutra. So I briefly dealt with some of the more common and more basic halachic dilemmas in modern medicine procedures and activities. I once again want to thank those responsible for this evening, for this event. Dr. Shlomo, the medical director of the hospital, Rabbi Wiener, and my faithful assistant, Rabbi Sprung, who many of you came to know, and the Choshev Rabbonim that are here with us tonight. And I want to thank you all for making this happen, for making this possible. My dear friend, one of the prominent members of this community, as you all know, Rabbi Tzvika Reisman. Many years we've done great things together, and I look forward to partnership for many wonderful years to come. Thank you all, and we have some time to take questions. Rabbi Wiener, how do we go about it?
Is it permissible for an attorney to prepare a durable power of attorney for health care for a Jew who specifically wants the document to instruct the agent to make decisions that won't be according to halacha? You know, we have forms available that you can instruct that decisions will be according to halacha, but if the person wants things done differently, is the attorney still allowed to facilitate preparing that document for a Jew?
You ask whether an attorney could help a person formulate his wish that at some later stage he will be treated not in accordance to Allah.
Correct.
Well, I would say if you can avoid it and let somebody else do the job, that would be preferable.
Mm-hmm.
But by halachic definition, if it is extremely important to you, either parnasa-wise, you know, if you might be jeopardizing your parnasa, I think there is room for leniency. And that is based, first of all, on the basic question. This would not be considered Bifnei Velo Titen Mechshol, because there's always somebody else that would do the job. And Ramah was one of the most important halachic Ashkenazi sources in Yerodei and Kuf Nun Aleph, maintains that there is no Isser of Misayeya. That is a contradiction between Taisus and two different sources. So, if a person would be jeopardizing his parnasa, I think he could assist the patient in formulating and signing those documents. If possible, I would recommend that someone else do the job.
Thank you.
Yes.
Could I ask the Rav to comment on an end-of-life situations? What exactly is the difference between passive and active interventions, you know, in withdrawal or withholding treatments?
Well, in many different areas in halacha, there is a tremendous difference between passive and active. And I know to the modern view, and sometimes to modern people, they have difficulty understanding why would there be a difference between actively bringing forth end of life or doing so in a passive manner. But I think in halacha and even in modern law, in many different areas, we do differentiate. Murder or homicide is a far greater transgression than refraining or abstaining from saving a person's life. I think by the law of this land, a person is not required to save another person's life. Israel is the only Western country in which a person is required by law to actively engage in saving another person's life. In America, that would be defined as a good Samaritan. A good Samaritan is somebody acting lifanim mishul esadin. Israel, after all, is a Jewish country. So in Israel we have lo tamod al dam reach. So Israel is the only country in the Western world in which a person is legally obliged by law to go out of his way and to actively try to save another person's life. So in modern law we do differentiate between active and passive. And in many areas of halacha, that is one of the most basic criteria. And it is the same. So actively participating in ending a person's life would be one of the harshest and greatest avedas, because that would touch on killing a person. Being passive about it and not initiating intubation or other procedures would be far more acceptable by halachic definition than actively bringing about termination of life. Without going into the various details.
In terms of if someone is in an end-of-life situation and the family or the individual or the doctor can extend a life at the cost of the person's sentience or seichel, for example, full brain radiation, is there a halachic perspective whether the family or the individual, the doctor, should push for this to extend life at the cost of the person's mind, their sentience?
Much has been said and written about patient autonomy. And most poskim are terrified just by bringing up the issue of patient autonomy. But in reality, in halacha, there is a lot of room for the patient's autonomy. And there are many tshuvas written by the Moshe, the Shlomo Zalman, and others, which I wholeheartedly support. A patient does have a great degree of authority. A patient does not have the authority or autonomy to terminate his life, or even to abstain from actively pursuing medicine or a remedy to his illness. But there are situations in which he does have autonomy and the right to say, I do not want this. So when we are dealing with extreme pain in a situation in which a patient is terminally ill, which in itself is a problematic definition, how do we define a terminally ill patient when we all know that nobody lives forever? But when we're dealing with people that are terminally ill or chronically ill and in extreme suffering, there is a great degree of autonomy that a patient has. And when a patient doesn't have the cognitive abilities to decide, there is also a great deal of authority his close family members have. And there are two basic approaches to the authority of family members. Shlomo Zalman and Moshe formulating the two different approaches. One would be, it is only if those close family members speak in the name of the ill, they, knowing the person, could best assume what he would want, if he could, what he would ask us to do. The other approach would be they, more than anybody else, care for the patient, and therefore there is significance in what their feeling would be regarding his treatment. Specifically dealing with the question you put forward, a person that has a brain tumor, and the treatment would be massive brain radiology, which probably would affect his cognitive abilities. I do think that he has the authority to say, I do not want this treatment. And we would expect his wish.
If the Rav could please discuss for a moment the provision of opiates at the end of life.
Of?
Of the provision of opiates, of providing opiate medication to ease pain and shortness of breath at the end of life, which may hasten death.
Yes, I think it is questionable whether morphine or other medication in the treatment of pain would hasten death or not. You know, I've read different articles and different opinions, and some prominent doctors argue that they would not hasten death. They would actually ease the breathing process so the people around the patient seem to feel that we are hastening his death, but that is questionable. I think when the motive and the intention is to ease suffering, even though we might be hastening death, but that is not the intention. And it is not definitive. We are entitled to administer medicine to ease the patient's suffering, even knowing that maybe we might be hastening death. Rabbi Wiener, so how long is this supposed to go on? Everyone present will ask one question.
Let's have this
will take the Chatzos.
We have this fellow here sitting in the front. Let's ask the last question.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Last two questions and then we'll conclude.
I'm not sure if it's too broad of a topic for tonight, but I wanted to know Rav's opinion in terms of IVF in general and for couples who have children or don't have children, how long to wait, genetic testing or different variations, donors, and.
Yes, it is a very broad question and topic. So when this technology was first rendered possible, some Gedolim had a very negative approach. Today, I don't think anybody is against IVF. And some of the Gedolim that wrote truths against this procedure, well, today, personally know some of the families, and they have Einiklach and Ureiniklach that came to the world by in vitro fertilization. Generally, it is a blessing. And I'm thoroughly convinced, as many other things, it's a gift of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, the inspiration and the possibility of in vitro fertilization. There are millions of people today that came to the world by means of this procedure and this technology. So for young couples that have no children, it's a blessing, it's a gift. Many times I am asked by couples that have 5, 6, 7, 8 children, and they still want to take advantage of IVF to have more children. Well, by halachic definition, it is permissible, but I try to discourage them. I think it should be recommended and actively encouraged for couples that have no children, 1 child, 2 children, but one must understand that IVF, even though we recommend it and halachically permit it, it is a problematic procedure from the halachic perspective as well. So the kiyum of the mitzvah of prior via would definitely override the halachic reservations we have. But many times when young couples come to ask me, and I tell the mother, if you would be my daughter, I would try to persuade you not to do this. you have 4 kids, you have 5 kids. Thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu, have nachas from your children. But I think we should put some limits to the IVF procedure. Israeli law does not prevent people bringing 10 or 15 babies to the world by IVF, but I think that the insurance would not cover beyond a certain number of children. And it is based on the Seichel HaYosher, on that, this is innovative procedure. So I think insurance companies are more concerned with the cost of IVF, but dealing from the halachic perspective, I think that even halachically, it is a problematic procedure, permissible, but still problematic. And therefore, I think that when a couple had the privilege of having a certain number of children, and they already are a reasonably large family, I don't think it should be encouraged.
The Rav spoke before about an anesthesiologist being involved in a procedure that's halachically problematic. What about the doctor himself, who's actually performing the operation? He's the resident, he's on call. How does he deal with such a situation?
That is a real shiloh. Maybe the first real shiloh we had here tonight. I would find tremendous difficulty in permitting a doctor to do a procedure which is clearly halachically prohibited. So, he's a resident, he'll have to bribe someone to do it instead of him. But once again, which would bring to the question, I think, first of all, he needs halacha consultation to know what is permissible and what not. Somebody brought up the question of genetic testing and genetic screening. In most cases, I think it is important. When there is room for concern that there might be a genetic problem between husband and wife, and in some cases, we would recommend that they bring children to the world by IVF and by the PGD procedure. In Shalas Julis Minchas Asher, I wrote that a couple that has a genetic incompetence and problem are, by halachic definition, potter from the mitzvah of Shriot. If statistics would prove that a substantial chance that the children might be physically or mentally impaired. So by halachic definition, they probably would be exempt from the mitzvah of priority, but we definitely would recommend in those cases that they take advantage of modern medicine and do IVF and do genetic screening before the fetus is replanted into the uterus. And that is the procedure that we define as PGD. But generally speaking, I think it is sometimes extremely important to do genetic testing and genetic screening for many reasons, and some of them are lifesavers. So many times doctors recommend doing genetic screening, and in most cases I do recommend that it should be done.
Okay, thank you all very much for coming. I think you get a taste of for why Rabbi Asher Weiss is the rabbi for Shaare Zedek and is consulted throughout the world. If anyone would like to meet with Rabbi Weiss tomorrow, please contact me, or if you need parking validation or continuing education credits, come see me in the back of the room. Thank you very much for coming. Have a good night.